can't say you enjoyed those early bits, because the survival was, sometimes it was mum and I hugging each other crying at 11 o'clock at night because we didn't know how we were going to pay the bill the next day. Also said, listen, you're not going to survive our rules or do any of our academia, so you better move on. So I was expelled at 17, and that's when I moved down, to everybody's horror, back down to Sussex, moved back in with my mother and said I was going to become a cabinet maker. And I said, no, it's not for me. I've tried, I've failed, and I need to be in control of my destiny. I knew somewhere deep down that I just had to start from scratch and do something myself, because measuring the success took a long time. It was such a long struggle. It was like a jumbo jet taking off. There was a lot of concern, because that was really, really tough. Those early days, just short of money, borrowed from friends and family. I couldn't see the success as much as the fear of failure. I think that's another recurring thought that I just remember that churns around in the back of that mind somewhere. It was the fear of failure. I am not going to fail. It was emotionally shattering.
Really?
Oh, cried my eyes out.
Really?
Absolutely cried my eyes out. On the one hand, I took a screenshot of the bank balance, which I sent to mum. But on the other hand, it was just, I don't know whether it was all those pent up years of pain, to get to what's success. You do have your dancing on the ceiling moment, there's no doubt about that. But also you realise what's important in life.
I'm on a mission to help the world to see success differently. Through sharing the stories of our guests, I hope to inspire those that listen. This is the Different Hats podcast, produced by H2 Productions. I hope you can join us on this journey. I just wanted to take a moment to talk about one of our sponsors, Nostos, an authentic experience of Greece right here in the heart of Hove. In a world brimming with dining options, finding that one place that captivates your palate and heart isn't always easy. It's about more than food. It's the stories, the ambience, the slice of another world. This is the essence of Nostos, an award-winning Greek restaurant. With traditional recipes passed down through generations, each dish promises a story and a piece of heritage. And Nostos is more than just a restaurant, it's a community contributor. Each dining experience supports initiatives close to their heart, from local charities to cultural events enriching Brighton and Hove's social fabric. They also provide catering services, bringing Greek cuisine to your personal events. For a taste of Greece without leaving town, visit nostos-hove.co.uk. And when you do go, say Sam recommended the feta nests. Oh my God, they are amazing. Okay. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. My guest this week is without doubt one of the true Sussex success stories. After inventing his first product, an ergonomic writing board in 1991 in his mother's shed, the company found in Posturite now supplies workplace health and wellbeing products and services to over 30 countries worldwide, turning over in excess of 33 million and employ more than 200 people. Someone that is a true inspiration to many in the business community, including myself. I'm delighted to welcome Ian Fletcher Price to the podcast. Fletch, how you doing?
I'm very good, Sam. Thank you. Very nice to be here.
Mate, it's great. Listen, great to have you on. And we was obviously chatting before we come up and sort of thinking, we sort of met through various acquaintances that we've got. And great to have you here and hopefully to share your story.
Looking forward to it.
Mate, look, we're going to jump straight in as we always do. So as with anything, everyone's story starts somewhere, right? So I want to find a little bit out about, do our life in 60 seconds. Tell me a little bit about your childhood, something about growing up that's helped shape the man who sits in front of me today.
Okay. I suspect it'll go back to the fact that I was at boarding school since 7 and kind of having to fend for yourself. And you're always surrounded by, I felt, peers that were better than me at nearly everything. I didn't find out till probably only a couple of years ago I'm dyslexic. So, you struggle your way through school and life and whatever, wondering why actually everything else seems so much cleverer and better than I am. So the success stories from the school days of it was only 9 years, only managed 9 years. The last year I was asked to move on. Were things like woodwork, which I know is a ridiculous thing to say. It sounds like a sort of hobby, but actually that was a formative part of my life, and I eventually sort of won a woodwork prize at school, went on the stage in front of the whole school to receive it, but it was a coffee table I made that's still at mum's, but it showed that I could be independent and actually do things myself. And actually it was always, you were always looking for that peer pressure recognition. They were clever at this or clever at that subject or better at sport or better at something. I knew I wanted to be good at something, had no idea what it was going to be. So the early days, woodwork would be something that stood out, and then that led to sort of being asked to be the stage manager for the school productions and that kind of thing. So the early practicality is a formative part of what I would say my life was.
Let's deal a little bit like you said about boarding school, and you found out that with dyslexia. So school life was, you found quite tricky then? Or
the academic side, was a mystery to me all the way through. It was a real struggle, and sometimes I battled through the subjects that are a bit better at maths and physics and things with less struggle. But the others, it got to the point where I sort of gave up, and in fact, the 7 O levels in old money, 5 C's and 2 B's, was not a lot of return for the amount of money my parents invested in a private education. So.
But it just goes to show, though, doesn't it? I talk on pretty much almost every episode about the education system, because everyone's got a different story around. Some people were really academic, some people not so much, and it's so interesting to find out about people, especially from if you've been diagnosed with dyslexia and you found that out later in life, that actually the school, the way the education system's set up, is actually really archaic, isn't it? It
is, yeah. I mean, I think it is better these days. I have to say,
sure.
But back then it was unrecognised. You were just, you're a bit thick.
You
just went down a lower set.
Isn't that mental to think that that people are labelled at that young age as thick, or you're a bit of a dunce or not intelligent enough, and not, because they're measured just on one small thing.
So I focused on the things I could, which I knew I could make things as practical. The swimming, was a reasonably good swimmer. So I got my own personal success and satisfaction from actually focusing on those things, to the detriment of the others, where it got to the point where it was untenable. The school sort of said, "Listen, you're not going to survive our rules or do any of our academia, so you better move on." Wow. So I was expelled at 17.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So, and then what at that stage? Then talk to me about that. What was your thought process about what you wanted to do for work, or was it even then like the practical side, or did you have a clue?
I had absolutely no idea. I was denied going to. There was a specialist woodwork college, which was Sir John Makepeace down in Somerset, and I remember my father. I'd asked to do woodwork O level, and my father, who was an accountant and a very staid pillar of society, magistrate, and all that sort of thing, said, "I'm not sending you to private school to become a bloody carpenter." And those were his exact words. Wow. And of course, I didn't take that very well. But ultimately, I had the last laugh by creating a business and making a product and turning it into a future success story. So, I had no idea. So I went to Hong Kong. The school girlfriend at the time lived out there, and I worked in the Vietnamese refugee camps for a few months, which was really uplifting and rewarding. I'd never been on a plane, I'd never been abroad. Suddenly I'm in a refugee camp looking after 0 to 5-year-olds, 150 of them. Wow. And again, the practical side came through, and I think that might be a common theme today. Sure. The practical side came through, whereby I was able to negotiate with the camp runners about how much budget we got, and I was able to build them things, basic things like climbing frames and sand pits and all sorts of stuff like that. And I ultimately I would have probably still been out there, but the call came from home: get yourself back to the UK and get a job, son. So I was dragged back by my ear home, and Dad had some friends in the Lloyd's insurance market, and I stumbled into that. In those days, we were in 1980 now, so no qualifications required, no insurance exams done, fell into marine reinsurance broking, and that was that. That was 9 years. So
Talk to me about did you enjoy that? Was it?
do you know, I loved it insofar as what few skills I had, I think came to the fore. You know, I've always been a people person, and broking is about going into the market, seeing the underwriters, persuading them that your particular contract is worth, you know, a bit of support. And I took to it, did reasonably well, got headhunted from the first job after 4 years or so, went to the second one, so it was with Cedric's, and then I went to Willis Faber. Really enjoyed Willis Faber. Created a new product there, funnily enough, that the directors didn't really want to go down that path, and so I got sacked from the market. Yeah, and that was the sort of turning point where I thought, right, I need to be in control of my own destiny. So I'm 26 now, and I've sort of done nearly 9 years in the market with a degree of success, but actually in the eyes of the big company and the directors and the sort of the impossible hierarchical level to penetrate, decided that wasn't for me. And that's when I moved down, to everybody's horror, back down to Sussex, moved back in with my mother, and said I was going to become a cabinet maker. And much to the sort of, you know, concern of my mates in the market, it was like, don't be silly, Fletch, come on, come back to the market, we'll give you a job. And I said, no, it's not for me. You know, I've tried, I've failed, and I need to be in control of my destiny. I can't work for big companies.
What was your dad's take on that?
He was, being so conservative, he was horrified because I hadn't gone into a profession, which he'd always thought, you know, any offspring of his would have to go into a profession. You know, it wouldn't matter whether it was accountant, law, whatever, but accountant would have probably been the first choice. So he was horrified, and at that stage, it was a frosty relationship. And do you know what? Rightly so. I think you'd be protective of your 26-year-old, well-educated son that's had a modicum of success in a career, that's turned his back on it, thrown it away to go and work in a garden shed and be a cabinet maker. So I totally understood it. There wasn't conflict from me telling him I was right. It was more, I knew somewhere deep down that I just had to start from scratch and do something myself.
Where does that come from, though? Like, have you ever looked at where was that belief inside of you to go, I'm going to start saying myself?
I think that's back to maybe a bit of the boarding school in my case. I wouldn't say necessarily for everybody. I certainly at this stage would not have called myself an entrepreneur, would never have envisaged running a company. You know, the timeline is quite clear about that. I was very low on confidence, but there was a determination to sort myself out, and I think that was the boarding school part. You know, you couldn't mope. Yeah, the independence. You can't mope around at boarding school for long because you get bullied and whacked and, you know, shoved in the corner. So you have to stand up for yourself a little bit in that kind of environment, especially in those days. You know, I think that's improved in time, but in those days, there was no feeling sorry for yourself. Roll your sleeves up and get on with it. Otherwise, you're going to have a very miserable, existence. So I think it was right. Come on. I'm going to get on with it. I'm going to make something. You know, that's good for the mind, good for the soul, making something, and that's where that started from.
And that was let's talk about that part then, where you've got it, you're in your shed and you're making with a view that I'm going to make stuff, I'm going to sell it, go out there, but create a business. From that was the plan then? Or? That was
the plan. Again, no strategic setup, no SWOT analysis or anything. The lucky break was a school friend who was family friend, a couple of years older than me, was by now he started as a doctor. He was now an osteopath, and he heard this story, and he said, "I'll give you a commission. Make me a sloping writing board that I can sell to my patients." Because this was, remember, prior to computers. I mean, computers were around, but most people working at a desk did not have their own PC. So he was treating people with neck pain and back pain, and he realised that the old Victorian lectern attitude of sitting up straight to read and write was quite, a very sensible approach, and there was no sort of product out there to do that. So I took that on as a challenge in a very informal way. Spent a couple of months, just buying pieces of MDF and piano hinge and trying to source small screws and double-sided sticky tape to stick the metal board on, that magnets would hold papers in place, all these bits and pieces. So I was scurrying around Sussex, various different suppliers, in and out of industrial estates, sourcing effectively the components for what became the Posturite sloping writing board. So after 2 or 3 months, it existed, and Simon was running a conference. It was a medical conference on a Saturday in December for 300 delegates. That was British Institute of Musculoskeletal Medicine, BIM. I can still remember that.
Wow. Okay.
And anyway, he was involved in organising it, and he said, "Right, come on, Fletch, we're going to exhibit." And I didn't know what a trade show was. I didn't know what exhibiting meant. So I turned up with the board. I didn't even have a pen and paper. I didn't have any background graphics. And he plonked me in this room with, and there were a few other people with, nice graphics and treatment couches and TENS machines and all the things associated with therapy. And I'm thinking, well, what am I doing here? And the first coffee break at 10:30, out came these 300 delegates. And I was swamped because, of course, as I would now know, it was a new product. It was a new kid on the block. What's this? I said, well, it's a Posturite board. Where do we get them from? Well, I'll make them for you. What we want to sell to the patients. Well, that's fine. Let me know and I'll sell it to the patients. It was so naive. I can't tell you how naive that day was.
Wow.
But the enthusiasm for the product was such that Simon and I went and had a beer across the road, after the conference that evening, early Saturday evening, and we shook hands on setting Posturite up together.
Wow.
We had no idea what Posturite was going to look like. It wasn't even spelt correctly in those days. It was spelt with a W in it, because, of course, posture right.
Yeah.
But that looked a horrible word, so that W soon went when I went to register the company. And in fact, there's a funny story about that, because when I went to register the company, I didn't know how to do that, but fortunately one of my cricketing mates was a solicitor, so, went into him and he told me how to do it. And as I was doing it, I said, on the P there, if I could put a little spine in, how do you do that? And he said, well, that's called a logo, old boy. So, okay, you register that separately, you trademark that, and that is honestly how naive I was about business, Didn't even know the difference between a logo and a company registration.
But lots of people I've talked to on here, entrepreneurs, people who've started that business, sometimes that naivety is a bit of a superpower, right? Because how many times would you look at something where you do sit down and you go, things have got to be perfect and I'm not good, but where you're naive and you just go, well, we'll give that a go, and that works out. Oh, that's good. Yeah. We'll just keep rolling with that. That naivety sometimes is a good thing.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think I found myself, certainly within the first decade, several times sort of saying, crikey, if I'd have known it was going to be this hard, I would never have started.
Really?
Jen, I remember that thought process, definitely. So I think having that naivety, you're quite right, is sometimes a better thing. You can know too much.
Yeah. Because there's so many, how many people will talk about, they sit down in a pub, talk about ideas, I've got this great idea.
Yeah.
But that fear of actually when you go, yeah, but I've got to do X, Y, and Z, then I've got to do this, and you go, oh, actually, yeah, and there's always going to be a problem. There's always going to be a reason not to start something.
Absolutely.
But taking that jump, and it's so, I'd like to think I'm going to go and start something to get that break or wherever you look at it, that opportunity, I guess, to be there and within them with them 300 delegates, and have that enthusiasm, I guess, for the product as well. Yeah,
I had enthusiasm for the product, and for the first couple of years I made them, and we were a single product company. I say we, it was me. I persuaded Mum to get involved and answer the phone and do a little bit of secretarial work. Well, she ended up being a linchpin, 13 years later, but I managed to retire her for the second time in her life. She was running about 5 departments, and she would love to tell you, I mean, she's still with us, that she'd love to tell you that she was replaced by 5 people, head of finance, head of customer service, head of HR, you name it. I mean, she was just doing it all. And when she retired, we were probably turning over, I would think, about 5 million. So we got it up to a critical state, and we were probably 35, 40 people. So she, without her support and help in those days, it just wouldn't really have happened. So, an amazing thing to do with your mother at that stage. So,
I'll bet.
26 to 40, really, quite a formative chunk of your life to then be thrown in, with your mother, literally, we're very close.
Yeah.
And we were always close before. We were close through that, despite some fairly choice language sometimes, I'm sure. And we've remained close since. Yeah. So it's been a nice story, though.
That's amazing. What, like you said, an amazing thing. Then I get with as it started to grow and with the success side of it. Again, I keep going back to your dad and just that because obviously he had a mindset of what he thought he wanted you to do, and then you've gone down that. But when you started to see that success, what was his take on that?
I don't think the pride came till a lot later, because measuring the success took a long time. I mean, it was such a long struggle. I mean, it was like a jumbo jet taking off. It was a long. It took, I think, about 7 or 8 years to get to $1 million turnover. And of course, that's a long time. In a 30-year-old company, 33-year-old company, whatever we are now, 7 or 8 years just to get to your first million. And of course, turnover doesn't even measure the business properly anyway, but it's a good barometer of where you are. There was a lot of concern, because that was really, really tough. Those early days, just short of money, borrowed from friends and family, had a little bit from help from the banks, but of course, they're not as hugely supportive as they should be. I did have one amazing experience. This is so old school, but Barclays went in with probably after a couple of years, went into the family Barclays branch in Heathfield. Mike Pass was the name of the manager. I still remember that name. And I had a fag packet business plan, and he gave an unsecured overdraft of £10,000. And we would have, I doubt we were turning over more than £150,000 at that stage. But can you imagine that now? An unsecured overdraft on the back of a business plan I'd written, in the kitchen that morning.
Computer says no, right?
Computer says no, yeah. I mean, it was good old-fashioned banking. But he saw enough, and actually were rewarded by the business, going on to better things, and Barclays making their money out of us in the future years. So,
Wow. Well, you mentioned there, especially those early years, some of the tough parts, and this is the great thing about sharing people's stories, and because people will look from afar, and people who have maybe just met you or see the success that you have achieved, and think, oh wow, look how well he's done. But that's 33 years, right? Of graft and building that up. So, and that's why I'm keen to always share some of the tough times and the challenges. So if we delve into done another life in 60 seconds, I said, if you could go back over that period, just give me one challenge that you faced, that maybe, and what you learned from that.
I think running out of money, it was probably the biggest challenge. And going to the professionals, asking for help in that respect, and being told no, and just the belief that people who are supposed to be in a position of knowledge aren't always right. When you're wrong, I know this is going to be a success, and you're supposed to be in the risk business, and you're not lending us money. So then, having it's an awful thing to have to do, to go cap in hand to friends and family, but I did it, and I said, look, I'm convinced that I can grow this business. I'm convinced that that we're on the right path. The appetite for health and safety in the workplace is growing, so I think it's a reasonably good sector to be in, and seeing people actually write checks and lend you some money was very humbling. And I took great delight in paying those people back over the years. And it's funny, because some that had done reasonably well in life sort of said, "Oh, that's unusual, Fletch. I don't normally get paid back." And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean? I wouldn't have asked to borrow it if I didn't think I was going to be able to pay you back." He said, "Well, not everybody does. In fact, not many do. You know, there's one, I won't name him, but there's one particular person who was very kind and generous to me in those early years when I did ask for some help, lent the money, and it's him I'm thinking of when I say, you know, when I paid it back, he said, that's unusual.
Wow. Well, I guess a couple of things that you mentioned there. One, about being a people person, and actually sometimes on paper, sometimes getting back to the bank, computer says no, that type of thing, but actually people buy from people in business, in life, and if people, I guess it's that belief in you obviously had that passion for it and that belief back then that you was going to make it into a success, and people bought into that, right?
It was, I couldn't see the success as much as the fear of failure. I think that's another recurring thought that I just remember that churns around in the back of that mind somewhere. It was the fear of failure. I am not going to fail. You know, I have to succeed at something. I can't. I've got nothing else to fall back on. Burnt my bridges in the you know, reinsurance market. I've been out of that too long now. That's gone. You know, this has to work. And you know, it was like blind faith that, you know, whatever I did, and when it was tough, I just spent more hours, you know, longer days, more hours. I mean, we were literally working every waking hour on the business. You know, we'd work in a day. I'd go out selling, making at the weekends, selling in the week, evenings, packing up the orders. You know, literally with the duct tape, packing them up, labelling them, sending them out. You know, we've been often, Mum and I would be up till midnight, you know, packing up the orders from that day that would then be collected the following morning and go out. And so every time it was tough, every time we were out of money, all I could think about doing was throwing more energy and more effort at it and more hours. You know, there was no pub, no sport. You know, there was no downtime at all, just to get through crises, the day-to-day crisis, basically.
It's such a good lesson, like, for people listening. I guess there's how many business owners, we've all been there, I've been there, and go through it all the time. You have them ups and downs, and that. But where that resilience inside of you, you're saying it was more the fact that I just didn't want to fail.
Yeah, definitely. That was a bigger driver. That
was the bigger driver.
Much bigger driver ever than thinking, right, at the end of this, you know, there's some money and or whatever it might be, the trappings of success or anything like that. Never even thought about that. I don't think at any stage in the business was it about what I might get at the end of it. Genuinely, it was always fear of failure, peer recognition. You know, 2 or 3 of my very best mates from school. One's a successful farmer, another's been a successful lawyer, entrepreneur, what have you. You know, we still really tight. And when we meet, you know, I still feel judged in that company. Am I worthy in that company? And that wanting to be accepted as somebody who was capable and had made a decent fist of it. It was more important than anything else.
That's really interesting about, like, and we all crave it. I think we're all guilty of that to a degree. That external validation, aren't we?
Nicely put.
We all. I think I'd be lying if I sat here and said, I don't care what people think. I'm just going to go and do my own thing.
Yeah.
Of course, and look, it's highlighted maybe even more so with social media now that we put our lives on social media, and there's that, again, you want that social validation, whether it be sitting around from peers, whether it be from family, whatever that looks like. There's that external validation that we still crave. But can you remember a point where you did feel that actually whether I've made it or I'm at that point and I've gone, I am worthy of being in that?
I think, there's no one point. There was a massive, I don't know if we're jumping around chronologically wise, but there was a big decision in 2005 when I decided to sell 20% of the business to the top 12 people that were in the company. And we were probably, you know, again, I think that coincided, where are we? Yes, that coincided with probably being about 50 of us in the business at that stage. And the reason was I had a 6-year-old and a 5-year-old, and it was a balance of life thing, whereby I didn't want to be an absent father. I think having been to boarding school, and not really had a close relationship with my father. That had an ongoing effect about wanting to make sure I did it slightly differently. And that's not to criticise my dad, but I wanted to do it slightly differently. So it was a two-pronged thing. It was getting the balance of my life right, but it was also locking in the 12 key people in the business so that we go through it as a team together and grow it together. And I felt that owning 80% of the business was going to be worth more in the long run than owning 100% and it being a dictatorship. So I've always firmly believed that was a genius move for both myself and for the business Posturite, and also for the guys that actually backed me, and they paid hard cash. You know, it was good old fashioned full ordinary A shares. So they went and borrowed from their families, and whatever source they could, to actually buy the shares. So we were genuinely in it as a team, and it felt like an equal team. It never felt like I was a, all-powerful 80%. We did everything together, and it was a collective group that went through from 2005 to the ultimate sale in, it was 2019, I think it was the first part of the exit. So yeah, that's a bit of secret sauce right there. I think, getting staff engagement and equity is very much something I'm an advocate of.
And I guess, again, a subject I talk about a lot on here about culture, getting that culture, getting people to buy into that. Not one, obviously they wanted to invest from a financial point of view and saw that, but actually, you've got, as a leader, you've got to create that culture where people want to be part of something that you're building, right?
Yeah. And
talk to me a little bit about that. What did you, again, the naivety, starting a business, and then where did you learn that on the way about going, was it you conscious of that? Going, I'm going to build this business, so I've got these people, good people around me, and I'm going to build a strong culture, the values and that type of thing. Was that in your mindset early on? Or?
I think there's a couple of points there. I think we were only 4 people up to that nearly the first decade. Me, Mum, Karen, and Norn. But at that point, when I had a friend who was in strategy at PPP actually, which is an Eastbourne business, and Lawrence did a SWOT analysis for us, which was again still learning. At that time, that was the first time I'd heard of that. Yeah. And it culminated in replicating what I was doing. I needed another salesman, so I hired my first salesman based up in Manchester, as it happens, and as bonkers as he was, he proved to be a great success. So he created a territory up there, created a sort of £400,000 turnover territory, and in the process of doing that, I realised that I'd stumbled across a good idea. His background was sports science, so again, that was chance, but I started recruiting more salesmen and immediately started to geographically cover the UK, whereas any other small ergonomics businesses at the time stayed quite regional. So quite why I felt it was important to have national coverage then, I'm not sure, but it again would prove to be another great move because it positioned us as the market leaders. Early on, we became quite the market leaders because we were the only ones that could service a national account. For instance, a bank like Barclays, use them as an example again. They've been a big client all the way through. So the recruitment process was sports science because they knew about anatomy and physiology. They were probably fit and healthy, played sport, made sure it was a team sport, didn't like any individual sports. So if it was golf or tennis or something like that, you're nixed, you failed the next interview. So as long as it was a team sport, and they hadn't worked anywhere else, and they were doing sports science at uni and didn't really know what they were going to do with it. They thought they were going to be personal trainers or go and work at a football club or something. Nobody really thought of sales as a job. So that characteristic of individual proved to be hugely successful because they were driven, they were fun to be around, they were sporty, natural salesmen without knowing it. Back to your point earlier, people buy from people. So I created quite early on a really good network of staff that are all still in the business. Nobody's left. Or we've had one or two, but fundamentally the generalisation is everybody is still there. And we peaked at 75 salesmen pre-COVID, and I think 70 of those started straight out of university with a sports science degree. So, once I'd got that formula, I stuck to it, and it worked really well. So you then create regions, and of course the sales competitiveness, one region against another or one individual against another. That competitive instinct in them made them great salesmen and has helped drive the business. I mean, we'll turn over 40 million this year. So,
wow.
And that's them. That is what they do.
Like you say, almost again, like that stumbling across a formula like that, where you go, it just. And,
all thanks to that first one, Colin. Bonkers Colin.
Bonkers Colin. But again, back to the culture piece. 200 odd staff, growing a business like that, and maintaining those people for such a long period of time as well. That's down to that strong culture. Right?
Real sense of culture, and I think one of the, by no means the only way, but I was fully involved in managing them. I used to be quite terrified of that. I'd have sleepless nights before sales meetings and what have you, because I realised I had no qualification or experience to be doing this, but I knew it was the right thing to do. So you just take yourself out of the comfort zone at each level of step into business growing, and managing a sales meeting was the next level of discomfort for me. And preparing an agenda, what were we going to do, what value we're going to get out of it, what topics we're going to discuss, presenting new products, inventing new products, all those things. Just made it really exciting in the end, but it also made us a team, because I think I was a bit older than them, so of course they were looking up to me, and I've got nobody to look up to, so I'm looking down at the thing, and they're looking at me, and I'm looking at them, and we'll do this together. We'll get through this. We'll do this together. But we had in, I think about 2000, we did our first overseas Christmas party. And it became quite a legendary Posturite thing. So we went to Prague, all 18 of us, all blokes actually, not very diverse. And we went to Prague, saved 20 quid a month out of our own money, all of us, and did that, and had a fantastic couple of days in Prague. And then every other year we did an overseas. We did Krakow, Barcelona, Tallinn, Riga. I'm probably missing one. And the last one we did was in Riga. 120 people for a Friday night, Saturday night. All flew over from the various airports in the UK. A lot of them, the cheap airlines, went to Riga. We had a stonking weekend in Riga. They were all pretty big weekends, but from 18 to 30 to 50 of us, 75 of us, but 120 was
that's a fair party.
It got out of control. We took our own band. It was chaos. I don't think there was much sleeping involved. We probably wasted some money on hotel rooms. But it was a riot. But they were talked about. They were talked about in the build-up to where the next one was going to be, and I always kept that quite secret. And I did all the planning for it. I did the recce's and everything. And then the after-party discussions of all the shenanigans that had gone on created a real atmosphere, real sense of, we work for a great company. If you're out there at Berwick and you're working in Posturite and you're chatting to your mates that work in an office in Eastbourne in an accountancy firm or something, well, we went to Barcelona for our Christmas party. What? So there was it helped with recruitment, it helped with retention, it helped with morale, and you get to know your colleagues. So when the chips are down and a customer's moaning at you down the phone, you call on your colleagues to help you out of a crisis, and everybody's there for you, pull together. So we really did pull together as a team. So unwittingly, what seemed like a good idea in 2000, just to clear off to Prague for, a boozy weekend, actually became an important cultural stepping stone of the growth of Posturite.
Okay, I'm just going to say something about one of our sponsors, Riverval. The world of cars, vans and minibuses is often a pain point for many of us. The hassle of finding the right vehicle, let alone looking after it, are all more things to add to our lists as busy people. Riverval's mission is to make motoring manageable, and that's why they provide leasing, purchasing, servicing and vehicle management. So whether you have one family car or a fleet of vans for your business, Riverval are your trusted vehicle supplier. Visit www.riverval.co.uk. Okay, let's jump back to the podcast. incredible. And I guess one thing as well I really take away listening to you talk, and listen to you talk with so much passion as well about the business, but that as a leader, because you've gone through every step of the business, right, from building the products to going out selling it, and then, like you said, constantly pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. It strikes me as a leader that you're so much in part of that. It's not like I'm the boss here. And
Oh God, I never ever felt
do you
like
know what I mean? That's what I mean. From understanding, listening to you talk, like you're just one of the team. Of course, they need guidance and leadership.
Yep.
But you can offer that because you've been on the path to be able to do it. I'm keen. Like what? Again, them traits as a leader. Where does that come from?
Where does it come from? God, I wish I could tell you. I don't know where it comes from. I guess some of that's either in you, but it has to almost be dragged out of you. I'm sure a lot of people would have it latently in them if they were put into a position where they had to show it and develop it. So I think there's more people that have got it than maybe realise. I just happened to sort of create this environment where we got this company, got a few products, started going, off we went, that it got sucked out of me as I went along. And I would never, the word entrepreneur is clearly overused sometimes, but I would never have called myself an entrepreneur until probably, I don't know, even 10 years ago. It wasn't something I would have used to describe myself. But in hindsight, I probably clearly was.
Yeah, 100, and especially like, and the great thing about your story, I guess, is the fact that like, actually building something, you've innovated, you've come up with an idea and built something, and then built a business on the back of that idea, and you've gone each stage. I've built this thing, I've gone and sold it, and then like, that is the. Encapsulates what an entrepreneur really is. I guess,
well, one of the most exciting phases was, I think it came down to 3 phases, Posturite. There was the early phase of just survival, building a brand, and
how do you look back, like looking back at that time, that survival period?
Yeah.
Take me back there to that period. Would you enjoy that moment? Did you look at that journey? Was it?
I can't say you enjoyed those early bits because the survival was, sometimes it was mum and I hugging each other, crying at 11 o'clock at night because we didn't know how we were going to pay the bill the next day, and so some of that was really painful, proper raw. Much easier to look back on it with pride and enjoyment with Harry hindsight, because you've come through and you actually made it work in the end. But I don't think anybody could say they enjoyed the pain of how difficult that side of it is. Money's horrible. To not have money is horrible, and to not be able to pay the bills. And we were very old school, Mum and I, very proud. You don't want to be late paying for anything, and and if your word's good enough, if you said you're going to pay them, you're going to pay them. We'll just have to find a way how we do it. Enjoyment would be the wrong word for that. But having got through that, and I think it was around about that time in that SWOT analysis that I found myself saying to friends, I think this might be, this is my career. This is probably what's going to be my job for the rest of my life. Because I don't think I even felt that. That was somewhere between 8 and 10. Until
10
actually,
years, and you still. It was until then.
It could fail. We could go bust. It could fail. It might not grow enough. How is it ever going to pay me enough to sort of have a family and a house and all that sort of stuff? Because I didn't have any of those things, and I think that helped. By the way, I think not having any commitments, starting young enough at 26 without those commitments, I think was I always used to think to myself, that's an advantage. Because it's only me. I mean, I can sleep in a box on the pavement if necessary, but you can't put that on your family. So starting young enough with no commitments gave you that freedom to be, I wouldn't say reckless. Back to that word, blind faith again. Just do it. So that was the first phase. The second phase was then building the sales team, and that was that once that momentum had started and I had sales directors and regional managers and that sort of stuff, my focus then became on product development, because I realised we'd built a business that had a brand, had a route to market, had a good sales team, but we didn't necessarily have any great value in the business. So the key then was to create own brand products, because we'd been gone from being a 100% own brand when it was the Posturite board to less than 20% own brand, and we were just a distributor for other people's products. So I sort of, chewed on that, and I think one of the first ones we did was at a sales meeting, gave everybody a lump of clay in the graveyard shift after lunch to keep them awake, and said, right, we've got an hour. You're going to design the perfect mouse, computer mouse. And so everybody played with the clay, and they made these shapes and what have you. Split them into small groups, and there must have been sort of, 8 groups, something like that. And then I made them all present to me at the end of the hour. So I'm there, and weird and wonderful shapes were presented to me. But there was a lot of goodness there's bits of goodness in lots of them. And so I did a brief summary on the spot that day of the bits I thought I liked. And there were 3 or 4 common themes. Being vertical was a massive theme, rather than flat, because it's the more natural position, the handshake position for your wrist to be anatomically. So vertical was one big theme. Buttons on the side, a base to slide around rather than small micro movements. So ergonomically, getting a little bit technical, but it's not that technical really. It's common sense. Bigger muscle movements are better than small movements where you're going to get musculoskeletal issues. So anyway, I immediately identified 2 or 3 key things, and then I took it away, and I then developed what became the Penguin ambidextrous vertical mouse. But that took another 2 years. From those bits of clay to actually the first shipment from China, inevitably, apologies, but you don't have any choice in these things sometimes. If you want to make a computer mouse, you're only making it in China. There's nowhere else in the world that you're making that. Sure. Anyway, but so 2 years from the clay to container load, boxed, printed, done, working, tested, and for sale. Wow. But that started the path of another half dozen own brand products. So we got back up to 80% own brand, even though we were growing size-wise. So, and even today, we're 80% own brand products.
And that must be such a rewarding part of that, right? Starting with clay and coming up with something. And seeing it develop into something else, and then going
hugely proud.
It must be.
That's back to school woodwork.
Yeah.
That's probably why I started with it. I hadn't thought to start with that, but that's probably why I started with that. Because that theme ran through. It's making things.
And you go back to that time at school in that woodwork place, thinking,
who knew?
You're sitting here now,
who knew,
with a £40 million turnover business. That's like, literally, what an incredible story. I'm keen to touch still on some of the challenges, because you briefly mentioned in there COVID and that period. Like, talk to me a little bit about some of the other challenges you're facing. That where does COVID sit with that in your industry and that?
Yeah, quite clear. So we were doing really well. I guess we were at about 30 million pre-COVID, with the full 250 staff. We'd sold 20%. It's a coincidence at the same percentage, to a private American company called Fellows. They're the business machines, shredders, laminators, what have you. Privately owned, 100 years old, out of Chicago. 40-year-old current chief executive approached us, wanted to diversify into the healthy workplace. Were we for sale? And I said, well, yes, I see an exit at some point, but I don't think we're worth what I would like to sell for. He said, that's no problem at all. So we chatted for a couple of years. He then bought 20% at a multiple, with a view to an option for the rest 3 years later, once we'd grown it to the size that I told him we could grow it to, and then exit that way. Well, that time came on the 10th of March 2020, and they did exercise the option, which was obviously 2 weeks before lockdown. So there was a lot going on around there, and they felt confident. I think they were still being hoodwinked by Trump that it was just a Chinese flu. So America were a couple of weeks behind probably where Europe were, and the threat of lockdowns I don't even think were mentioned even 2 weeks out. So they went through the deal, and I then was technically out. I had no equity, and I was not contracted to stay. But I'd said in the process that I wanted to stay on as CEO, and they took me on my word, and I did. So to answer your question about COVID, we've sold, so we've had to deal with that, and the shareholders also, the other 12, have had a payday as well. Probably with the exception of one, not enough to retire on, but still a nice payday. The turnover halved in the first month of lockdown. So the top line halved, and it was like, wow, what are we going to do here? So I lent on the experience of the, was it 2007, the July bombings, two bombings in London, whereby we were about 70 people at that stage, and our turnover halved in that month, and I made 10% of the people redundant. So I made 7 redundancies, which I'd never done in Posturite. We've always only really just grown. But that early call then proved to be great. You cleared out a little bit of dead wood, motivated those that stayed. Financially, it made sense. And then obviously it picked up after those July bombings, but one didn't know. You got half your turnover, you've got to make cuts. So I had that reeling in my mind about COVID. So I suggested to fellows, I said, look, I don't think our 75 salesmen are it's going to be a different world. So I suggest we make 50 redundant. And this was in May, probably, April and May, somewhere around there, that I had that thought to make an early, tough call. And I know there was furlough and stuff like that, but I just felt that, already Zoom and Teams were being more widely used than they had been before, and I couldn't see how face-to-face selling was going to bounce back in a hurry. And also, just financially, our top line's halved. We've got to do something here. So anyway, fellows said they were great. They're still great, and they're still supportive, and I'm still non-executive chairman. But they said, if that's what you think, I said, well, if it was my company still, that's what I would do. And they said, well, that's good enough for us. So we did, unfortunately, very sadly for them, but we made 50 of the field sales guys, redundant, which of course in that climate, people realised it was a world crisis. So there was no pushback. It was accepted, and I think we paid fair, and we did it from the bottom up. So we were now left with the top 25, who I felt. We argued the toss as to whether it should be from the top or the bottom, or a combo. But I felt if one was going to be now selling over screens, you needed the experience and the confidence and the age and the ability to communicate and all those good things. So we kept the top end as it happens. But that was a really, really tough decision. But we then also, at the same time, pivoted the business to home working. Because, of course, that suddenly was a new expression. Home working came out of nowhere. And that required, equipment at home, some sort of desk, chair, what have you. And our customer base has always been sort of the FTSE 250, the higher end. And so the higher end of our customer base were buying equipment or giving a budget to the people that they were asking, their employees they were asking to work from home. So we very quickly got back on the top line to the same level of turnover. I think by about June or July, our top line had bounced back. So we were quite a quick U, or more a V than a U almost, which, there were challenges. Margins suddenly squeezed. Home working equipment, lower value, less margin. So the bottom line was challenged, but the top line got there fairly quickly, and that's now, that theme's continued. So the hybrid home working, in some ways you could say our market size almost doubled, because you've got the equipment in a mainstream office, and then you've got the equipment for the home working. So we quickly saw it as an opportunity that to help out our traditional customer base and expand the size of our potential marketplace. I wouldn't want you to think it was easy. I wouldn't want you to think we've had it away, sure, because it's not. But it certainly could have been a lot worse. There are some industries you can think of where it was 10 times worse, or catastrophic.
Yeah, and look, how many businesses did didn't make it through, and which is really sad, and it's
Yeah.
you know, it's difficult. But I guess it's just a sign of just trying to be. There's a problem. What's the solution? And
Yeah.
trying to find that solution. I think that people, a lot of businesses pivoted, and you've got to look at something different, whatever that looks like. I'm keen, like, just with you and your, because especially being in that position, you didn't need to
Yep.
go in and do that. But I'm assuming part of it is your baby that you've built up, that you still
100%.
wanna, that would be a key thing for you in your mindset to go, actually, this is
And the loyalty to the people in the
of
business.
Of course.
You know, it's no point in me having a payday and going off into the sunset, you know, and letting down my friends that have got me there. And, you know, genuinely friends. So, it still feels like my baby. I mean, I don't mean to be, if fellows are listening, I don't mean to be disrespectful to them, but it's still mine. And
Absolutely.
so it genuinely really does. But it was more just actually all the people in the business. So they've got families, livelihoods, careers. They've got another decade to go. You know, I'm not going to just run away from that. So I love keeping an eye on it, and where I feel I can add some value or assistance or guidance. And in those early days, I really did run it. I mean, for the first couple of years, I was probably more of a CEO in those 2 years, once COVID arrived, than I had been in the previous probably 5. Wow. You know, I had such a great, senior management team that were running the business really. So yeah, I really got stuck in, and then I realised, once things settled down, that CEO is the wrong title, because I'm not really behaving like that anymore. But chairman is okay. Non-exec chairman's okay.
Yeah. The word that comes, like, listening to you talk like that, word that I use quite a lot, probably one of my key values in business, something I'd always said, whatever I do in business, one word that I always want to do something, do it with integrity. That's the word that comes to mind when I hear you talk.
Oh, that's a privilege. Nice to hear that.
Like that. Just like you said, it's your baby, you built it up, and you've done what you needed to do to get it to a stage, and you've come away now, and there isn't that responsibility for you to do that, but to look on that and go, I've got to look after them people who have helped me get there.
Oh, definitely.
I've got to this is my baby, I'm not going to let this, I'm going to jump back in, I'm going to make sure that it gets to that next stage and helping it to get there. And obviously clearly was the right decision, like you said, a tough decision, but making that from the experience from 2007, learning from that, and going, I'm going to take that. But that is such a strong message for me, for anyone listening and people within business, that integrity is, if we can keep
That's a
that.
good word. Yeah, no, I like you associated me with that, because that's how I feel, and it's genuine, and you can't fake that.
Yeah, exactly that.
I still feel now there's some big decisions we've got to make now. Are we outgrowing the premises? Where do we take the business going forward? I like being involved in those discussions. I chair the board meetings, and I like being involved in those discussions. It's a privilege to do so, but I see it as making sure their livelihoods continue to progress and their careers continue to progress.
We talked just over the last sort of 20 minutes. We talked a little bit. You mentioned and you alluded about failure.
Yeah.
And you not wanting to fail. But what is your relationship like with failure? Go back to the insurance thing. Did you see that as a failure when you come out of the insurance thing, or was that your decision that you made? Just talk to me about your relationship with it. How do you?
Well, I think it had to have been a failure, because I wasn't able to sort of impose my capabilities into the market. I had this idea that I'd seen another broker do, big broker, linking the direct side of the business to the reinsurance side of the business, and they created a big product there that you could then underwrite through the reinsurance if you wrote the direct stuff. So it was utilising some big thinking. I thought, that's a good idea. My company's got direct and reinsurance. We need to do that. So I went off at my tangents, and I started talking to the direct people, got the underwriters in the market to sort of write a reinsurance program around it. Had it all mapped out in my mind, but it was just not the way the directors that actually managed me wanted to go. So ultimately, yes, it was a failure. I was not able to sort of see that through. And
but I guess what I really want to get to is like you then go into the Posturite and running that own business with the fact like reason people don't start sometimes is they fear failure.
Yep.
But you come from that and still you've gone and you've stuck with something for so long, believing that you're not gonna believe I can't allow this to fail.
Well, I find a way.
You'll find.
I think it's the fact that I find a way. And so I think is it a male trait? I don't know if that's sexist, but I think if your wife says to you that there's a problem, I'll fix it. I'll find a way of fixing it. And I suppose there was an element of that in the business. If we've got a problem, I'll find a way around it. And if we've got no money, I'll go and borrow it from a friend. If our product's not good enough, I'll design a better one. That is. And if I've designed something that actually doesn't sell very well, that's the ultimate test of whether you've designed a good product or not. And we've had a few of those. I remember a thing called a Tri-Rite footrest underneath the desk. I thought it was clever. 3 sides of a triangle, different sizes, gave you different heights for your footrest. I thought it was a fantastic product. And I told anybody that would listen it was a great product. Told the sales team at sales meetings it was brilliant. I think we sold about 50. And ultimately, that's a failure.
But that's the key, especially in your industry. There's got to be that element of. I use it quite a lot. And it's become quite a thing where especially within technology, fail fast, right?
Yeah.
Fail fast and learn. So it is that you're gonna, because if you're not innovative and you don't try it, some things are gonna not work out. But it's learning from that. Actually, that didn't work. But I bet if we looked at how many products have come out of something that's failed, but you've maybe turned something else into, and then
if you don't have a few failures, you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. And so I wasn't afraid of that kind of failure.
Sure.
That's a different definition of failure, I think. So I didn't mind when a product did well. I was angry. I was annoyed with myself, and I to start with, I was annoyed with the salesman and not selling it. So once I got over that and realised it probably wasn't their fault, actually, I was like, well, fine, move on, next one.
Okay.
So that was never a problem.
Look, running a business as long as you have, and being, like you mentioned, that early stage of not. Obviously not having families, it was just you. That was okay. But talk to me then about that later part where you are still growing it, but then you have got kids at a young age. And talk to me about work-life balance. What did that look like for you at that period?
I was pretty clear about that. So yes, in offering them the chance to come in, and they come in. One of the things I remember saying, even in that process, as they were handing me the checks, that some of this is. I don't want, on a Wednesday afternoon when I'm watching a sports match, you thinking, where's the boss? He's off again, with the kids, or if I have a game of golf, oh God, he's on the golf course again. I don't want you to think like that. I want to be able to have a degree of balance. So I think I got that right, actually, and I think it was the quality of the people that were prepared to take. You've got to empower the good employees. No point talking about it and then it's still being a dictatorship and every decision comes through you, in a very vertical organisation. I gave people complete carte blanche within their remits to make decisions and do that. I said, I'm never going to give you a bollocking for making a wrong decision. You're more likely to get a bollocking for not making a decision, because a business can't run as it grows without people further down the line making decisions. So, and I genuinely felt that as well. So, and on the whole, I doubt even on one hand I could name any bad decisions that most of them made. We all knew what we were doing. They all made good decisions. And it's all customer centric. It was always, the answer is yes. What's the question? That was another of our real mantras. And it probably got us in trouble later on, because as we grew and you get more process driven in a business, the exceptions and the outliers become very hard to manage. You need more and more process because of the volume and the scale of the size of the business, which doesn't interest me at all. And probably quite a good thing I became removed from the process, because that is definitely not my skill set. But I recognise that you do need to. Whereas in my day, literally, if the customer wanted a different an adaptation to a product, I'd go back and I'd adapt it just for that customer. I mean, goodness knows how much money I probably lost doing that. But you had a happy customer, and it created a reputation, and it kicked us on to the next level, and people chose to use Posturite as opposed to XYZ for their ergonomic solutions in the workplace because of the service they got. And maintaining the service levels is key.
'Cause that can be lost sometimes. Like people think I've got saying they want to grow and they keep going, but actually then get to a point where that level of customer service is not there. And I appreciate as companies get bigger, like you said, there's got to be processes put in place.
Yep.
Get that, but actually that level of customer service or
Yep.
high level of customer service has got to be something.
I think we've been out of sync. We're not perfect at all, and our customer service hasn't always kept pace with the size of our business, and so we've been out of sync a few times. I think at the moment, not just saying, I think we're in a good spot, but in the last 3 or 4 years, our customer service has definitely been behind, and not so much throwing more people at it, actually our processes. So we've had some good people come into the business, improve us, and it's needed it. But you're always sort of like leapfrogging, one step and up and then another one back, and trying to have a smooth run through. I doubt there's many businesses that have a smooth run through.
Absolutely not.
But living through those blips is quite painful because you're letting a customer down, and it galls us all to sort of know that a complaint comes in, or the phone, or email, or returned order because it was too late, or whatever it was. You hate that. As a small private business, you hate that.
It's so interesting. I know we spoke briefly before, but obviously I interviewed Richard Skerritt a little while.
Yeah, Richard.
Richard's a good friend of yours. And but he mentioned something very similar. He said, like, I still now get upset if I know that, and I'll still maybe make a call if I need to. Like, I still that relationship side of it. If I lose a customer for whatever reason, it still hurts.
Yeah.
Because it's, again, back to your...
Oh, really? I think somebody's speaking ill of Posturite because they've had a bad experience. It's like a dagger.
Yeah, sure.
It really feels like that. Because it just would never have been like that. Much easier when you're smaller. Much easier when you're at the coalface and in control of it, and able to smooth it over and make it jump in the car and go and deliver it.
Sure.
And I would do all those things.
Wow.
So much harder with scale. But
course.
still hurts.
Yeah.
This is Geo. Geo runs a scarf company. Geo doesn't see the need for telecoms. Everybody uses mobiles now. But can a mobile really be a business phone? Geo is having coffee with a client, Gabby. Well, actually, Geo prefers acacia leaf tea. But what happens when someone calls? It could be a big new deal. Surely it would be rude to take the call? But many people hate leaving messages. They may just call a competitor instead. What can Geo do? The answer is simple. Turn the mobile into a business phone. With the Go Giraffe app, Geo can quickly transfer the call. Or, before the meeting, Geo can simply use the app to divert calls. No more missed calls, lost deals, or unhappy customers. Turn your mobile into a business phone today. Go Giraffe.
Of course, well, look, we're coming sort of towards the end. I'm keen to... When any entrepreneur, when they talk about their journey, we set out, and some people have got certain goals, and I've spoke to Olympic champions on here, and like Sally Gannell's been on people. We set ourselves a goal. We need to do that in business, right? We set ourselves a goal. I'm keen to look at that point where you do sell, like you mentioned in March 2020, you sold the whole company. Just talk to me about that feeling at that point. How did you feel at that moment? Was it that euphoria moment? I've built this for the last 30 years and I've got to this point, and now I've achieved everything I'd set out to achieve.
It was emotionally shattering.
Really?
Oh, cried my eyes out.
Really?
Absolutely cried my eyes out. On the one hand, I took a screenshot of the bank balance, which I sent to Mum, but on the other hand, it was just, I don't know whether it was all those pent up years of pain, to get to what's success. Let's say in this instance, the money's the success. But the years of pain and the things you've been through to get to that point, whether it's an emotional release, I guess it probably is. But yeah, far from sort of a euphoric dancing on the ceiling moment, actually, it's quite a strange feeling. Anyway, you get over that fairly quickly, and you do have your dancing on the ceiling moment. There's no doubt about that. But also you realise what's important in life, and it's not just going out and now spending some of that hard-earned cash. That still, I don't get any pleasure from doing that. I've got more pleasure in diversifying into other business startups, and I've now got maybe 8 or 9 new little ventures that if I'm honest, I'm the line of credit, and I'm the sort of non-exec chairman and mentor, but I recognise in those startups the same enthusiasm and path that those often friends or people I get introduced to are going to be taking and going on, and the excitement of that buzz. So it's almost like a replication of the journey that I've had and the excitement I've had doing that I can't let go of. And I'm getting just sucked into a few of those, and I love them.
I love that, but because ultimately, we all need a purpose, don't we?
Yeah. Well, it's only games of golf or whatever, or sitting out reading a book or whatever it is that you like to do, albums you want to listen to, whatever it is. I think I've been reasonably successful as a business person, so probably it's no coincidence that I'm replicating that a little bit more. I never allowed myself to get distracted before. With Posturite, I felt I was in control of my destiny, which is what I'd wanted to be, and any other distractions from that were futile, because actually this is what I know I can control and make a success or failure of. Whereas now I've got a bit of free time to do that, a little bit of finance behind me. You can now indulge in those things and replicate some of those same principles, business practices, hopefully cut a few corners for those ones I'm involved with, and try and avoid a few of the pitfalls that are always out there, and fast track them through, to another level of success for themselves.
Amazing. You mentioned success, and again, the tagline of the podcast has become helping the world to see success differently, because we talk about, and I'm still convinced actually that people's success in society, we still measure it based on someone's financial status. Yeah, and that's the way that it's just natural. That's how we measure business, and we do that. But I'm keen. You sit in front of me now, financially very successful in that sense. Built a business and talked about the times and the tough periods and all of that to get to where you've got to. But where you've been, where you are right now, where you're going, how do you define success?
Well, the late great Nick Ascroft, my best friend probably, had his theory of it was a third family, third business, and a third charity. And that was one of the things, anybody that remembers Nick well will have probably heard him just talk about how he defined his breakdown of his time. And I wouldn't say it's something I stick to, and measure that to the nearest percent. But the family I'm pretty comfortable with, two grown-up kids that I have a lot of fun with, my wife, holiday well, ski, and what have you. The business side, I still feel pretty engaged with Posturite, so there's still not a day that I don't think about the business or have some sort of input into it, even though I'm non-executive in the business now. And the charity, I'm chairman of East Sussex Vision Support. I'm involved with Children with Cancer Fund in Eastbourne, and almost on the charity side, the mentoring of those startups. Is that charity, is that business? But there's a split of my time that I feel quite comfortable with, and I would say that's how I measure my success. Have I got the balance right in my life of what I'm doing and what I want to do? That I'm pretty happy with that. I don't think anyone is overweighted, so that's how I would measure success.
Love that. Balance is the key, right?
Yeah, a little bit of everything.
Yeah, exactly. Because, like you said, and it makes me sound, every time I talk about it, makes it sound like that there's something wrong with getting that fine. And there's nothing. Of course, we've got to make money to survive. And actually, sometimes look at by creating financial wealth for yourself in that sense, you're actually able to have more of an impact and influence on the world by helping other people through mentorship, through investment, through financial support, whatever that looks like. But you're able to achieve that, and that then goes back to the fulfilment and purpose piece. Right?
Yep, I sleep very easily,
and that is all we can hope for.
All you can hope for, and your health. You can never ignore the fact. Enjoy your good health while you got it. You know how long you got that for. So fingers crossed and touch wood and all those good things.
Well, tell me, what does the future hold for you?
It's a difficult one. I think it's a bit more of the same. I'm 60. I feel that's not too old not to be able to enjoy all the activities. So a lot of travel, a lot of sport still, a lot of golf, a lot of skiing. I'd like to see some of these new startups through to a level of success, however they want to define their success. I'd like to see that. I'd like to be around long enough and healthy long enough to enjoy the family for a good time longer. Grandchildren would be great. I'd like to think it's a decade of more of the same, please. And I don't really want anything to sort of change that too much.
Fletch, honestly, mate, I'm really, really grateful for your time and coming on and sharing your fascinating, inspirational story. And what's so great, like you listen to you still talk about Posturite, but talk about your journey with so much passion and enthusiasm. And it's for I guess for myself, for people listening, like on their journey to whatever their success or their business journey, that they're take so much from this and see what you've achieved, and not just the financial success, but done it with integrity and done all the things that you've done to achieve it. Is truly inspiring. So I'm honestly really grateful for your time and coming on and sharing it with us.
That's very kind of you, Sam. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, and I appreciate it.
Amazing. And that, as they say, sir, is a wrap.
It's a wrap.